South Africa's education standards are back in the spotlight tonight as opposition parties are pushing for a tougher Matric pass mark. Build One South Africa is calling for the minimum pass rate to be raised to 50%, arguing that the current system actually leaves young people unprepared for the job market, while the Democratic Alliance has echoed similar concerns, proposing instead a gradual increase of the pass requirement for key subjects. While no policy change has been made, the debate is currently intensifying and could shape the potential future of the country's schooling system. For more on this, let's now welcome education expert Mr. Brahm Fleisch. Brahm, it's such a pleasure to have you with us here on SA Today. So welcome. So I'm sure you heard our speakers in that clip preceding our interview. It's quite a topical issue, this one. So it's quite vital to note that the current pass mark raised concerns of the quality of education and graduate employability, Brahm, because these children, unfortunately, it's a reality. They do suffer at higher learning institutions and just overall professional environments. So a much needed change indeed, but how should we go about implementing it?
So first thing, I think it's important to reiterate what the Minister said, that the 50% pass rate needs to be understood in the broader context of what the policy says. So it is not a 30% overall, that there are requirements for home language and first additional language and requirements for other subjects as well. So we need to have a more accurate and more direct and more specific understanding of what the pass requirements are. I think that the concerns are valid. There are problems with South African education, and there's no doubt that adjusting a pass mark may have some impact. But I think the underlying issue, and I think some of your speakers and those in Parliament have identified the fact that we have a serious problem in our education system, and the problem begins very early on in the first 3 years of formal schooling. The department's own research suggests recently emerged that 30% of learners are reaching the minimum proficiency level, the benchmarks for reading at the end of grade 3. Unless we address the underlying issues, we're not going to really do much by just shifting a technical approach at the grade 12 level.
Mm-hmm. Now, Brahm, let's look at the arguments, right, that have been put forward for raising the pass mark, like your improved competitiveness, of course, confidence, as well as higher quality education. But this is still debatable because, of course, the quality of education actually differs significantly based on our social background. We know the current democratic dispensation of our country, and we've seen some of these students actually being high achievers at their schools, then actually struggle to get higher education placements.
So there are a lot of different issues here that you've raised. Mm-hmm. There's a question about the disparity between children who are attending quintile 5 and independent schools and children attending schools that are quintile 1, 2, 3 or the less privileged schools. Mm-hmm. That's clearly a major issue and a huge source of inequality in our education system. Mm-hmm. Then there's also a distinction between the school-based assessment and the assessment and the performance on an external assessment, particularly the National Senior Certificate, the final examinations. Those are all clearly problems in our education system. The inequality across the board is clearly the most glaring issue in South Africa. But the fundamental underlying issue is that our children are progressing through the grades without necessarily acquiring the fundamental skills that they need to succeed at the grade 12 level. So the big challenge that South Africa currently faces, and I need to say that a lot of work is currently underway, is to address the underlying skills so that children acquire the ability to use reading and mathematics as core tool subjects as they work through the school curriculum. Mm-hmm. Until we address those fundamental underlying constraints, it's not really relevant whether we adjust it slowly or fast. We need to actually address the fundamental learning process that needs to be improved over time.
But, you know, Brahm, there's also been, maybe let's dissect also the counter arguments that as well as complexities then that this move could potentially bring about should it be implemented, like increased risks of failure and a need for incremental changes. We understand currently that government apparently has no immediate plans for the change in its current policy. So even if it were discussed, it still needs to go through intense scrutiny.
So, I mean, I think that obviously there hasn't been a major discussion about adjusting the pass mark, for home language and for mathematics and subjects and the additional subjects. That hasn't really been on the agenda. What is on the agenda, and I think it's true when we had an ANC minister and our current Democratic Alliance minister, is the recognition that foundational literacy and numeracy is the key building blocks of substantially long-term improvement of our education system.
True.
And I'm pleased to say that there is a consensus now about what needs to be done. It may not yield massive changes in the short term, but it is the thing that needs to be done in order to really build a sustained quality education system that provides opportunities for all in the long term.
A very quick one, Brahm, before I let you go. I'm sure you heard the speakers. They were also saying that we can't just talk about this topic or discussion simply as, a number point. How would you then recommend the implementation process? Should it say go ahead? For example, do you think the DA's phased increase proposal is more plausible, or we should just go for broke and hike it once at 50% for every subject as per BOSA's proposal, especially taking into account pupils that would be directly impacted and affected would be the poorer and less resource schools?
So I think clearly we need to think about a research-based approach to, if it is to be a change in policy, we need to understand what the implications are, what the implications for schools, for universities, for TVET colleges, and really ensure that any change in policy has been thoroughly researched and that is done in a way that is sustainable and actually benefits the learners in the long run.
Brahm, great conversation. Thank you so much for your input, sir.